I never thought I'd be the guy who had to choose between his marriage and his brother's children, but that's exactly where I ended up at 42 years old, standing in my parents' kitchen on a Tuesday evening, being told that my life was about to be rearranged for the convenience of everyone except me. My name is Greg, and I'm a project manager at a commercial construction company in Columbus, Ohio. I've been there for 15 years. I make decent money, not great money, but enough. My wife Sharon and I bought a 3-bedroom ranch in Hilliard back in 2015. We don't have kids. We tried. We did 3 rounds of IVF between 2012 and 2015, and it nearly broke us emotionally and financially. After the last round failed, we sat down one night, cried together, and made peace with it. We focused on each other. We traveled. We got a dog. We built a life that, while not what we originally pictured, was genuinely good. My younger brother Derek is 36. He's the kind of person who has always landed on his feet, usually because someone else provided the landing pad. He's charismatic, good-looking, the kind of guy who walks into a room and everyone likes him within 5 minutes. He married Tanya in 2013. She's 34, works part-time at a salon. They have 3 kids. Ethan is 9, Mia is 6, and Lucas just turned 3. Our parents are Frank and Linda. Dad's 68, retired from a Honda plant in Marysville. Mom's 66, retired from the school district where she was a secretary for 25 years. They live in a modest 2-story in Westerville, about 30 minutes from us. They've always been more hands-on with Derek's kids than you'd expect from grandparents, which should have been my first clue about where things were heading. See, Derek has never been what you'd call stable. He's had at least 6 jobs in the last 10 years. He gets bored, or he has a disagreement with management, or he finds something that pays slightly more, and he's gone. Tanya is similar. They've moved 4 times in 8 years, always chasing something better. And through all of it, my parents have been the safety net. Missed rent, Mom and Dad cover it. Car needs repairs, Dad writes a check. Kids need school supplies. Mom takes them shopping. I used to bring this up gently. I'd say things like, "Dad, maybe you guys should let Derek figure this one out on his own." And my dad would get this look on his face, like I just insulted him personally, and he'd say, "He's family, Greg. That's what family does." And that was the end of the conversation. Sharon never liked it. She'd say, "Your parents are going to run out of retirement money bailing out your brother, and then who do you think they're going to turn to?" She was right, and we both knew it, but I didn't want to be the guy who caused problems. I kept my mouth shut. It was October of last year when everything started. Derek called me on a Wednesday evening. He sounded excited, which was unusual because Derek only calls when he wants something. He told me he'd been offered a regional sales manager position with a company based in Nashville. The pay was significantly better. There was a relocation package, and it was the opportunity he'd been waiting for. I said congratulations. I meant it. Then he said, "But here's the thing. Tanya and I need to get down there pretty quick, like within 3 weeks. The company wants me in the office by November 1st, and we're trying to figure out what to do about the kids, especially with school." I asked what he was thinking. He said, "Well, Ethan's in 4th grade. He's finally settled at his school. Mia just started kindergarten. I don't want to pull them out mid-year. Lucas is in that daycare on Seldom Seen Road, the one Mom takes him to and picks him up from. If we move them all to Nashville now, it's going to be chaos. We won't even have a place to live yet." I said, "Okay, so what's the plan?" And there was this pause. That specific kind of pause where you already know what's coming but you're hoping you're wrong. He said, "What if the kids stayed with you and Sharon for a few months? Just until the school year ends. We'll get settled, find a place, and then bring them down over the summer." I said, "Derek, we don't have kids for a reason. We don't have the setup for this. Our 3rd bedroom is an office. We're not equipped." He cut me off. I know. But Mom and Dad said they'd help with the day-to-day stuff. Mom can do drop-offs and pickups. Dad can watch Lucas during the day. You and Sharon would just need to have them at the house for dinners and bedtime. It's only temporary. I should have said no right then. I should have said absolutely not. Figure out your own life. But I could hear the desperation in his voice. And more than that, I knew that if I said no, my parents would step in and try to do it all themselves, and my dad has a bad back and my mom has arthritis in both hands, and the thought of my 68-year-old father chasing a 3-year-old around made me feel guilty. I told Derek I'd talk to Sharon. That conversation did not go well. Sharon listened to me explain the situation, and she sat on the couch with her arms crossed and she said, "Absolutely not." I said, "I know. I hear you, but what? Greg, we are not taking in 3 children. We don't have children. We made peace with that. And now you want me to become a temporary mother to 3 kids because your brother can't get his life together?" I said it was just for a few months. I said Mom and Dad would handle most of it. I said Ethan was a good kid. He'd be in school most of the day, Mia too, and Lucas would be with Dad during the day. She looked at me and said, "And who's going to be up with Lucas when he has a nightmare at 2 a.m.? Who's going to make sure homework gets done? Who's going to cook dinner for 5 people every night? Your mom? She can barely open jars anymore." She was right about all of it. But I called my parents the next day and told them I was willing to do it, temporarily, with conditions. Mom cried. She said, "Greg, you don't know how much this means to us. You're such a good son." And that right there, that phrase, such a good son, it hit me in a place I didn't expect, because I realized I'd spent my entire life trying to hear those words, and I'd heard them more in that one phone call than I had in the previous 10 years combined. Sharon was furious, but she agreed, on the condition that there would be a firm end date. June 15th, end of the school year, no extensions. Derek and Tanya moved to Nashville on October 28th. They dropped the kids off at our house with 3 suitcases, 2 backpacks, and a garbage bag full of stuffed animals. Tanya was crying. Derek shook my hand and said, "I owe you, man, I really do." The first 2 weeks were rough but manageable. Ethan was quiet and stayed in his room mostly. Mia was confused and clingy. Lucas screamed for his mother every night for the first week. Sharon and I took turns sitting with him. We converted the office into a bedroom with 2 twin beds for Ethan and Mia, and we put Lucas's pack and play in our bedroom. My mom did help. She came every morning at 6:30 to get the kids ready for school. She picked Lucas up from daycare. She cooked dinners 3 nights a week, but by the 3rd week I could see it was taking a toll on her. She was exhausted, her hands were swelling, and I started picking up the slack, which meant Sharon had to pick up more of it too. By December, the kids had settled into a routine, but our life had completely changed. Our weekends revolved around kids' activities. Our grocery bill had tripled. Sharon was doing laundry constantly. Our dog, a 10-year-old lab named Cooper, was getting stepped on and stressed out. And Derek called maybe once a week. He'd talk to the kids for 10 minutes, tell me everything was going great in Nashville, and say, "Just a few more months, buddy." Work was getting harder too. I had a major commercial build starting in January, a medical office complex in Dublin, and my boss Ray started noticing I was distracted. I was leaving early to pick up kids, coming in late because of school drop-offs. Ray pulled me aside one day and said, "Greg, I need you here. This project has a tight timeline, and I can't have my project manager half present." I told him I was dealing with a family situation. He said he understood, but understanding has a shelf life, especially in construction. I started using my lunch breaks to drive to the school for meetings. Ethan's teacher wanted to talk about his reading level. Mia's teacher wanted to discuss her separation anxiety. I was sitting in tiny plastic chairs in elementary school classrooms, and I kept thinking, this isn't my life. This isn't what I signed up for. One night in mid-December, I was helping Ethan with his math homework. He was struggling with long division, and I was trying to be patient, but I was exhausted. Sharon was giving Lucas a bath, and Mia was watching TV in the living room. Ethan looked up at me and said, "Uncle Greg, do you think my dad is coming back?" I said, "Of course he is, buddy. He's just getting things set up in Nashville," Ethan said. "Mom said they might not come back until I'm in 5th grade. I stopped. I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Mom was on the phone with Grandma. She said Dad's job is going really good and they might stay longer. She said Uncle Greg and Aunt Sharon will take care of us." I felt something cold settle in my chest. I didn't say anything to Ethan. I finished the math homework. I put him to bed, and then I went downstairs and told Sharon what Ethan had said. She put down the dish she was washing and turned around. She said, "Are you surprised?" I said, "Derek told me June." She said, "Greg, Derek tells you whatever Derek needs to tell you to get what he wants. He's been doing that his entire life. Why would this be any different?" I wanted to argue, but I couldn't, because she was right. Then in January, something happened that shifted everything. I was at my parents' house on a Saturday picking up Mia's winter coat that she'd left there. My dad was in the garage and I went out to say hi. He was organizing some boxes and I noticed a folder sitting on his workbench. I wasn't snooping. I picked it up to move it out of the way and a document slid out. It was a printout from a real estate website. A house in Franklin, Tennessee, 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, listed at $415,000. And written across the top in my mother's handwriting were the words, "Derek's new place, closing March 15. March 15, not June, March." I stood there for a second and then I put the paper back and didn't say anything. But my mind was racing. If Derek was closing on a house in March, why were the kids still going to be with us until June? I went home and told Sharon. She stared at me and said, "They're not coming back for the kids in June, are they?" I said I didn't know. Maybe the house needed work. Maybe there was a reason. She said, "Greg, use your brain. They bought a house. They're settled. If they wanted their kids back, they'd take them back now. They're using you." I called Derek that night. I asked him how the housing search was going. He said, "Oh, we're still looking. Nothing yet. The market down here is crazy." He lied to my face. Or my ear, technically. He flat out lied. I didn't confront him yet. I wanted more information. I started paying attention. I went to my parents' house more often. I listened. And over the next few weeks, I pieced together what had been happening. My parents had given Derek and Tanya $50,000 for the down payment on the Nashville house. $50,000 from my parents' retirement savings. I found this out because my mom mentioned it to my Aunt Karen at a family dinner, not realizing I was in the next room. She said, while Frank and I help with the down payment. It's what you do for your children when they need a fresh start. I walked into the kitchen. My mom saw my face and went pale. My Aunt Karen suddenly needed to use the bathroom. I said, "You gave Derek $50,000? Mom said, "Greg, it's not $50,000 from your retirement, and you didn't think to mention this to me?" Dad came in from the living room. He said, "Greg, calm down. It's our money. We can spend it how we want." I said, "You're right. It's your money. But let me make sure I understand the full picture here. You gave Derek $50,000 to buy a house in Nashville, a house he's closing on next month, and yet his 3 kids are still living with me, and you told me they'd be here until June. So what's the actual plan, Dad? Because I'm looking at this and it seems like the plan is for me to raise his kids while he starts his new life." Dad's face got red. He said, "That's not fair." I said, "What's not fair is that you've been lying to me. Derek's been lying to me. You're all pretending this is temporary when you know damn well it isn't." Mom started crying. She said, "We just wanted what's best for the kids. Derek and Tanya needed this opportunity. The kids are happy here. They're in a good school. They're settled." I said, "They're settled because I made them settled. Sharon and I did that. Not Derek. Not Tanya. Us. And now I find out that Derek's buying a house and you funded it and nobody thought I deserved to know?" I left. I didn't say anything else. I just left. When I got home, Sharon was sitting at the kitchen table. She'd been on the phone with her sister. She looked at me and said, "What happened?" I told her everything. The house, the $50,000, the March closing date, Derek's lie about still looking for a place. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I want them gone by the end of February. All of them. The kids go back to Derek. If he has a house, he can be a father." I said, "Sharon, the kids." She held up her hand. "Greg, I love those kids. I do. But I'm not going to be used. We are not being paid. We are not being thanked. Your brother lied to us. Your parents lied to us. And now I find out they gave him $50,000 while we're spending $1,000 a month extra on groceries and gas and everything else, and nobody's offered us a dime. This isn't family helping family. This is you being taken advantage of and me being dragged along." She was right. I knew she was right. But the thought of sending those kids to Nashville, into a new house with parents who'd basically abandoned them for 5 months, made me sick. Ethan had just started making friends at school. Mia called Sharon Aunt Mommy sometimes, which broke my heart every time. Lucas didn't even ask about Tanya anymore. I spent the next week trying to figure out what to do. I talked to my friend Doug, who's a family lawyer. He told me that without formal guardianship, I had no legal standing to keep the kids, but I also had no legal obligation to keep them either. He said, "You can call CPS if you think they're being neglected, but from what you're describing, it's not neglect in the legal sense. It's just selfishness, and selfish isn't illegal." I called a family meeting. I invited my parents, Derek and Tanya. I told them all to be at my parents' house on Saturday at 2 p.m. I told Derek I'd pay for him and Tanya to drive up from Nashville. I didn't tell him why. That Saturday, everyone was there. My parents were nervous. Derek was confused. Tanya looked guilty, which told me she already knew what this was about. I sat at the dining room table and I said, "I know about the house in Franklin. I know it closes on March 15th. I know Mom and Dad gave you $50,000 for the down payment. And I know you've been lying to me about still looking for a place." Derek's face went white. He looked at my parents. My dad looked at the floor. I said, "So here's what's going to happen. The kids are coming back to you by March 1st. Before you close on the house, you will come get them, or I will drive them to you, but they will not be living with me and Sharon past March 1st. Derek said, "Greg, you don't understand. The house needs work before we can move in. We need time." I said, "Then rent an apartment, rent a house. Figure it out, Derek. You're a father. Act like one." My mom started crying again. She said, "Greg, please. The kids are so happy here. They're settled. You're doing such a wonderful job." I said, "Mom, stop. I'm not doing a wonderful job. I'm doing your son's job. That's the problem. You gave Derek $50,000 to start his new life, and you gave me 3 kids and a bigger grocery bill. Does that seem balanced to you?" My dad finally spoke up. He said, "We didn't ask you to do this alone. We've been helping." I said, "You've been helping with the kids, yes, but you've also been lying to me. You knew about the house. You knew Derek wasn't coming back in June. And you let me believe this was temporary because you knew if you told me the truth, I'd say no." Silence. Tanya was looking at the table. Derek was staring at the wall. I said, "I love those kids. I have loved having them in my home. But I will not be their father so that Derek can pretend he's still in his 20s. And I will not let you and Mom enable him at my expense." My dad said, "What about the kids? What about their stability?" I said, "That's Derek's responsibility, not mine, not Sharon's, his." Derek finally looked at me, and instead of anger, what I saw was something worse, relief. He looked relieved. Like he'd been waiting for someone to tell him he had to take his kids back because he didn't have the courage to say it himself. That made me sadder than anything else. Tanya spoke up for the first time. she said. He's right. We need to take the kids back. I've been saying this for months. Derek kept saying they'd come down in the summer, and I kept asking when, and he kept changing the subject. She looked at Derek. We can't do this. They're our kids. Derek didn't argue. He just nodded. I laid out the logistics. I'd drive the kids down on February 26th, which was a Friday. That gave Derek 2 weeks to get the house ready or find a short-term rental. I'd pack up all their things. I'd provide a list of their school records, medical records, everything they'd need to enroll them in Nashville. My mom was still crying. My dad was staring at the table, and I felt this terrible mix of anger and sadness because I realized that in their minds, I was the bad guy. I was the one breaking up the arrangement. I was the one causing the problem. Never mind that Derek had abandoned his kids. Never mind that they'd lied to me. In their eyes, I was supposed to just keep going, keep being such a good son, keep absorbing the cost and the labor so that nobody else had to be uncomfortable. I went home and told Sharon. She hugged me for a long time. She said, "I'm proud of you." And I almost started crying because nobody in my family had ever said that to me for setting a boundary. They only said it when I was being useful. The next 2 weeks were hard. Ethan overheard me and Sharon talking about the move, and he asked me one evening if he was going to live with me forever. I sat him down and said, "Your mom and dad have a new house in Nashville and you're going to go live with them. It's going to be an adventure." He looked at me with those 9-year-old eyes and said, "But I like it here, and Sharon makes good pancakes." I had to walk into the other room. On February 26th, I loaded up my SUV with everything the kids had accumulated over 5 months. Car seats, clothes, toys, school projects, the pack and play. Sharon rode with me. We drove the 6 hours to Franklin, Tennessee. Derek and Tanya had rented a 3-bedroom house near the new place they were closing on. It wasn't great, but it was clean and there were beds, and Tanya had decorated the kids' rooms with posters and balloons. She tried. I'll give her that. We unloaded everything. We got the kids settled. Sharon showed Tanya where everything was. The kids' medications, Ethan's inhaler, Mia's nightlight, Lucas's sleep schedule. She'd written it all down in a notebook, every detail, 5 months of accumulated knowledge about 3 children who weren't hers. When it was time to leave, Mia grabbed my leg and said, "Uncle Greg, don't go." And I had to peel her fingers off and hand her to Tanya and say, "I'll see you soon, sweetheart. Real soon." We drove home in silence. Sharon held my hand for most of the drive. We didn't talk until we were about an hour from home, and she said, "Did we do the right thing?" I said, "Yes, we did the right thing." She said, "Then why does it feel so terrible?" I said, "Because doing the right thing usually does." Over the next few months, things settled into a new normal. Derek and Tanya closed on their house. The kids started at a new school. Derek called me once a week, sometimes twice, and for the first time in his life, he actually seemed to be trying. He sent me pictures of the kids in their new rooms. He told me about Ethan joining a soccer team. He asked my advice about mortgage rates, which told me he was finally thinking about long-term things. My parents were distant for a while. My mom called me about a week after the kids left and said, "I just want you to know that your father and I are hurt by how you handled things." I said, "Mom, I'm hurt by how you handled things too." She said, "I don't see what we did wrong." And I said, "I know you don't, and that's the problem." We didn't speak for 3 weeks. Then my dad called me on a Thursday evening and asked if I wanted to grab lunch. We met at a Bob Evans near his house. He sat across from me and he looked older than I remembered. He said, "I owe you an apology." I waited. He said, "Your mother and we got caught up in Derek's excitement about the new job. We wanted so badly for him to succeed that we didn't think about what we were asking you to do. And when we gave him the money for the house, we should have told you. You deserve to know." I said, "Yes, I did." He said, "I'm sorry, Greg, I really am." I nodded. I said, "I appreciate that, Dad." He said, "Your mother, she's having a harder time with it. She thinks you were too hard on Derek." I said, "Derek is 36 years old with 3 kids. Nobody was hard enough on him. You certainly weren't." He didn't argue. He just looked at his coffee. I said, "Dad, I need to ask you something and I need an honest answer. Did you guys change your will?" He looked surprised. Then he looked away, and I knew. I said, "What does it say?" He said, "Your mother wanted the house to go to Derek because he has kids and you don't." I sat there. I let that sink in. The house they'd lived in for 35 years. The house I'd mowed the lawn of every summer from age 12 to 18. The house I'd repainted the deck of when Dad threw his back out. The house I'd always assumed would be split evenly because that's what fair looks like. I said, "And you agreed to that?" He said, "I didn't want to. Your mother was very insistent. She said Derek needs more help, that he has a family to provide for." I said, "Dad, I've been providing for Derek's family for 5 months, in case you forgot." He said, I know. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I said, "I'm not going to fight you about the will. It's your house. It's your decision. But I want you to understand something. You and Mom have spent my entire life treating Derek like he's the one who needs protecting, and I'm the one who can handle everything on my own. And you know what? I can. But being able to handle things doesn't mean it doesn't hurt when the people who are supposed to love you equally don't," he said. "I know that too." We finished lunch. He paid. He hugged me in the parking lot, and I could feel his arms shaking. I drove home and told Sharon about the will. She was furious. She said, "After everything you did for those kids, after everything we sacrificed, they're giving the house to Derek?" I said, "I'm not going to fight about it." She said, "Why not?" I said, "Because if I fight about it, I become the villain. And I'm tired of being the villain for doing the right thing." She said, "Then what are you going to do?" I said, "Nothing. I'm going to live my life. I'm going to go to work. I'm going to come home to my wife. And I'm going to love those kids from a distance. But I'm done being the safety net for people who only value me when I'm useful." It's been about 8 months now since all this happened. Derek is still in Nashville. He's actually doing okay. He kept the job. The kids are adjusting. Ethan called me last week and told me he made the honor roll. Mia sent me a drawing of our dog Cooper with the words, "I miss you, Uncle Greg," at the bottom. Lucas doesn't really remember me, and that hurts more than I expected it to. My parents and I have a relationship, but it's different. We see each other for holidays. We talk on the phone every week or two, but there's a wall there that wasn't before. My mom still doesn't think she did anything wrong. My dad knows he did, but he doesn't know how to fix it. And I've made peace with the fact that some things can't be fixed, only accepted. Sharon and I took the money we would have spent on the kids over those months and put it toward a trip to Ireland, something we'd been talking about for years. We leave in September. We're going for 2 weeks. No kids, no obligations, no family drama, just us. The other day, Derek called me. He said, "I want you to know that I've started paying Mom and Dad back for the $50,000. I set up a payment plan. $200 a month." I said, "That'll take over 20 years, Derek." He said, "I know, but it's a start." I said, "Yeah, it is." He was quiet for a second, and then he said, "I'm sorry, Greg, for all of it. I didn't realize how much I was asking you to do. I didn't think about it, and I should have." I said, "Yeah, you should have." He said, "Are we okay?" I thought about it. I thought about the kids, about the 5 months they lived with us, about Mia's hand on my leg, about Ethan asking if he could stay forever. I thought about my parents and their will and the $50,000. I thought about Sharon standing in our kitchen saying, "I'm proud of you." I said, "We're getting there, Derek. We're getting there." And I meant it, because here's what I've learned about family. Family isn't about sacrificing yourself until there's nothing left. Family isn't about being the one who always says yes, always steps up, always absorbs the cost so nobody else has to feel uncomfortable. Family is supposed to go both ways, and when it doesn't, when it only flows in one direction, the person at the bottom drowns. I didn't drown, but I came close. And the thing that saved me wasn't my parents or my brother. It was my wife, and it was my own willingness to finally say no more. Some people will read this and think I was selfish for sending those kids back. Some people will think I was cruel for drawing a line. But I'll tell you what I know. I know that those kids are with their parents now. I know that Derek is finally stepping up, not because he wanted to, but because he had to. And I know that my marriage is stronger now than it's been in years, because Sharon and I went through something hard together and came out the other side still holding hands. That's enough for me. That's more than enough.